So I'm going to talk about multi-axis turning today, and it's a huge area. You know, there's so many different variations on multi-axis. I can't possibly cover anywhere close to all of it. And it varies from very relatively simple things like what Emma did in her demo last week, where she did, turn the off-center hole just by moving that in a two-jaw chuck. That's a fairly simple or, common technique. You could do it very similarly with, I do have in a box somewhere, I think I know where it is, the joiner off-center jig, which will do a similar thing. And I have yet to use it. I bought it several years ago, and yeah, I'm sure we all have tools. As we were talking about, we all have tools like that that we've bought and never used. Um, Last year at the symposium, I bought from Lyle Jameson a 5/8 inch spindle gouge. I still haven't figured out what to do with that. I don't know why. It was an impulse buy, and okay. I was thinking, I guess I was thinking along, Richard Graffin roughs out bowls with a spindle gouge. And I thought, well, a 5/8 would probably be good for that. But hasn't happened yet. So I've played with it a little bit, but okay. So off center or multi-axis turning. Um, a lot of the information that and what I have done, I'm just going to show a few things that I've been experimenting with over the last few years. Um, I my Cindy Drozda does a lot of wonderful multi-axis things, boxes particularly and Raleigh did this really. I was really impressed with this. A four-sided box. And the thing that's really impressive about this is when you look, I mean, these lines are really nice and straight. I'm going to show a twisted form. In some ways, the twisted forms are a little more forgiving because you're not going to notice if that curve is not absolutely perfect. But if that line isn't straight, everybody can see that. And if you look at it from the top and the bottom, it's all symmetrical. That's really well done. Um, and I've gotten a lot from Barbara Dill, and I want to mention this book of hers. Can we show that on the screen? Okay, so this book, I highly recommend that you buy this book if you don't have it. For one thing, it's just a beautiful book. But one of the things that she set out to do, does anybody not know who Barbara Dill is? Okay, she's an a fairly elderly Turner now, lives in Virginia, and she really well, she was a nurse most of her life, and then later in life she got interested in wood turning and wood carving, and she particularly was interested in multi-axis turning, and she just said she started out like most of us, just experimenting and not really knowing what was going to come of it, and so she decided to really try to um, categorize the uh, techniques and the outcomes of what you would do. And so she basically divided it into four types of turning, and uh, two with an arc where you're not turning the entire piece to round, and also two where it comes out to round, but also with axes that are either parallel or non-parallel. So you basically end up with four quadrants. And I don't know if we zoomed in enough on that you can see it. Um, so we have four quadrants here, and in the first quadrant you have an archetype with parallel axes. And so if the axes through the wood, if there's one on center and there's one going straight, or there's two, off center but going straight and they're parallel, you're going to get this type of outcome. If they're not parallel, you're going to get a twist. Same thing with circular. If they're parallel, you'll get these kind of stacked forms. And then if they're not parallel, you'll start to get offsets on them. And so, you've got these four quadrants, and that really does define pretty much all of these. Well, this is strictly spindle turning that she's doing. So she has done bowls, but so that, and I'm going to pass these around. Um, so you can see the layout. I tried to draw it, but I think my drawing is pretty bad. So here, why don't you take, yeah, one on this side and one on that side. And if you look at those, I started from a center point, uh, took my dividers, and in this case, it's a very small circle, but I scribed a circle in there, and then I took the diameter, and in order to get equal thirds on this, and you can, of course, Raleigh did it in fourths, quarters. To get equal thirds, you take your dividers, set them to the radius of the circle. Yeah, actually, where should I be for this? Does this work, Larry? Okay. Yeah. And so I took the dividers and scribed a circle around there. And then from one point here, I went with that radius and scribed across that circle and here. And then the opposite point here, that's going to give me 3 equal divisions. I could also get 6 by going in between there. You can get 4 by just using the cross lines. And I don't know how you get 5. There's probably a simple way to do that with dividers, but and I scribe it on both sides. Now, one thing that Barbara didn't mention or didn't do, she would just number them 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. And if you want uh, straight sides, you would go 1 to 1, and 2 to 2, and 3 to 3 as you turn them. I'm doing a twist today, and this is a bottle stopper. You want to take that, Andy, and pass it around? Um, and so in order to get that twist, what I'm doing is I take point 1 to point 2, point 2 to point 3, and point 3 back to point 1 on the opposite sides. And that sets the piece this way, and you get your twisted form. If you do it the opposite, you can get the opposite twist. I also, let's see, I guess I didn't bring it. I thought I had. Yesterday I was just messing around with one of these, and I turned instead of having these on the same axis, I had accidentally, because I wasn't paying attention, I had twisted them 90 degrees, and it came out with a little less of a twist, and I kind of liked it. So, but I'm going to go ahead with the way I've already got this laid out today. Um, and it just kind of, it was a little bit gentler curve, and I went, oh, that's kind of cool. So those things can happen too. There's a lot of experimentation you can do with this. One thing I was thinking about doing today, and it's not ready for prime time yet. I saw I in our library we have a video of David Nittman, who I never met. He was gone before I got active in the club. But David was doing the same principle except on a bowl. And so he came out with 3 sides on the bowl. And this is the first one that I did like that. This is another one that I started and never finished. But you can I'll pass this one around too, and you can just see that it's the same layout, and again going opposite points on opposite sides. In fact, these are completely opposite. So instead, you alternate your layout so that on one side it's, let's see, on one side this is vertical, on the other side this is vertical. So when you do that, you're going. I guess that's what I did on that one bottle stopper. So you're alternating your directions on opposite sides, but you can just see how that more or less comes out. This one, like I say, is not. That demo wasn't ready for prime time yet, so that didn't happen. Just a couple other before I go on, a couple other this is a form of offset turning that a lot of people have done, an off-center bowl. That's again, it's actually very similar to what Emma did with her pendant, just on a little bit larger scale. And and then of course there are things. These are a couple of Bruce Perry's pieces that I happen to have in my collection, and they're so Bruce had an interesting mind. So again, off center turning. Now this twisted concept, you can use that. I have made a bunch of boxes, lidded boxes with that, and I can't find any of them. So I must have either given them away or sold them or something. But I did a salt and pepper shaker set like that, and it's pretty much you turn your twist, and then you do whatever you want to do to it to make it into another form. So let's go ahead and do a twist. I guess I'll use the maple blank today. Probably easier to see on the lighter wood. Yeah. Dill. That's her insult. But yeah, and if you're going to buy that book, I would recommend email Barbara and get it directly from her instead of giving half the money to Jeff Bezos so that he can send Katy Perry to space again. And unfortunately, he brought them all back. A Ducks truck, yeah. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, Jessica did a session on that, right? Yeah. Hmm. So, and in contrast, I'm usually that guy that shows up with lays out 14 tools for, to do the simplest project. Not today. I'm actually only going to be using about 4 tools, and I am going to start with the spindle roughing gouge. And even though I know everyone here knows that, I'm going to say it again. This is a spindle tool only. We never use it on cross grain work. And I am using this is a steb center, and this actually is the bottle stopper mandrel because I've already drilled this out for as a bottle stopper and put a brass insert in there. But I'll be switching that to a steb center at the next step. And let's get that here. Although I will show something else that I'm going to use. This is a 1/2 inch. Yeah. Um, here's the headstock end of it. And I'll be using that in a few minutes. So the first thing is just to get this round. And since this is all spindle work, I'm going to be turning pretty fast, generally around 2,000. Now, on either end, I'm going to just turn, this is not a tenon, it's just a little guide. And I'm going to be using a Bedan for that. This is one of Jean-Francois's favorite tools. The Badan is really a lot like using a skew, except it doesn't have the compassion. So, mhm. And so I'm just going to make a little shoulder here on this end, about to there. No, a little bit smaller. And this is basically giving me my size for the bottle stopper. That was supposed to be a joke, like the skew, but without the compassion. Okay. Yeah, the Badan just is only one bevel, and the French use it with this bevel up. Okay. A beating and parting tool, actually, that's what this tool was until Laurent Niclot ground it into a Badan for me, has two bevels. Now, I also have a beating and parting tool, which I have not used a lot. And one of the things I noticed about Emma's, she had hers actually with a convex bevel on both sides. And it seemed like it might be friendlier. I didn't get a chance to try that, but uh, pretty much. And and same really as a skew. Like when I took Jean-Francois Escalon's class, he used really five tools. He had a half-inch spindle gouge, or probably a 13 millimeter, and a 3/8 or a 10 millimeter, and then he had this is a 10 millimeter 3/8 Badan, and he had a 5 millimeter Badan, and then a parting tool, and that's pretty much all he used. Um, I'm waiting. Trent is going to be making. I think actually Laurent's going to be making the 5 millimeter Badan soon, and he said it'll probably be ready for Christmas, so it'll be on my list. So, okay, so these shoulders that I just cut, that's just a guide for the size of this, and so I'm going to just make them red. Still can't really see them well, but it helps somewhat. And uh, now, one of the things that I found, I talked about numbering 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 and all of that. Uh, I found that it helps a lot to color code them because it's very easy to get confused as to which numbers you're going for. And so I just, whatever I decide on my layout, I've made this one red and this one red. I've used red, blue, and green to color those, and I find that it helps a lot. So now I need to get rid of this bottle stopper mandrel. There, Deb center. Now, we always joke about never move your tool rest while the lathe is running. When you're doing multi-axis work, that is an actual rule. Uh, just the other day, I thought, oh, I can move it. So don't do it. So now I'm going to go from my red to red, and I don't even know what, because I marked this out earlier, if that's 1 to 1 or 2 to 2, 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, but it's already laid out that way. I'm going to set my tool rest. Come on, move. So I want to get my tool rest as close to the place that I'm cutting. I'm going to be cutting on this portion of the wood, from here down to here. And so I want to get that tool rest as close as I can. And then until I'm finished with this portion of it, that tool rest is not going to move. So if I start to move it, stop me. Um, I find that the best tool for me on this is the spindle roughing gouge. Barber Dill uses a traditional grind bowl gouge, and it looks actually it's sharpened very much like a spindle roughing gouge. So it's kind of the same tool, just a little smaller. I find that this works for me. So, uh, and with multi-axis, speed is your friend because the faster the wood is rotating, the more it behaves like a solid piece of wood. If you try to turn multi-axis slow, this one's place to put my feet here. Now that guide that shoulder that I put on there, that's where I want to cut to, at least initially. Let's just see how we're doing here. And I cut a little too far. That's okay as long as I do that on all the other facets. Okay, I'm just going to make one more cut to clean that up. Yeah, now I'm going to go blue to blue. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the biggest spindle roughing I have. So, and that does make sense. Mhm. Well, I'm doing them since I'm doing a twist. I numbered them one, two, and three, and one, two, and three on the opposite side corresponding. But then I went from one to two, and from two. Oh yeah, you can take a look at that. And I just found that the color coding really helps. And no, that's not blood. That's the red marker. Some of you might remember when I was doing a demo for the club, and I managed to cut myself and had to stop and put band-aids on it. Doing here. Yeah. And I think I actually made them a little too shallow because I'm going a little deeper, little beyond them. But as long as I use them as sort of a guide and, get pretty close. One more cut here. I've got a little bit of a facet still here. Well, usually I end up going around these a couple of times before I'm finished. And go to the green now. Yeah. And like with so many things, I'm looking at that horizon there, not at where I'm cutting. At home, I use a Vic mark, and one of the things I've gotten used to, and I find myself doing it a lot, is it has a knee bar shut off, and I'm always going. Yep. Barbara says you could do this with a skew too. I know that would be Rick's choice, but okay. Let's go back to red now. No, but for this one, it is important because, in order to keep the sides consistent, if you move it, you're probably going to have your sides not even, which is also an option. Now, in Emma's demo last week up at Rocky Mountain, she was showing how she got a smoother finish cut by turning her spindle roughing gouge this way. Oops, went a little too deep there. And dragging it back this way. Okay, let's see if that was any smoother. Yeah. But I've made a couple of people have made tap handles this way for their beer taps, and they come out really nice. Especially when they're longer like that, they seem to just look really good. Unamas green. Yeah, that's on this one. Yeah, I think so. Hmm. Hmm. Oh, in this case, no. I would sand these after I've done them all, because you have to actually no. I'll sand. It's hand sanding, so I'll just do it because the next step, I would at this point I would put this back on between centers. In fact, I'll put it back this because it's a bottle stopper. I'll put it back on that mandrel, and then I would hand sand. I'd use a little block, and you can actually, you can edit those um, curves a little bit if you find that something isn't quite pleasing. And so, but yeah, I just put it back between centers. Get what? Uh, I just find it's easier to do it this way. Yeah, and so yeah, because I can just put it actually between centers like this. Um, and now I can rotate all three faces, and if I see a little part of the curve that I don't like, I can edit it a little bit. You know, this one actually looks pretty good. I would sand it more at home, but I'm not going to do. I didn't even bring any abrasives with me, so I'm not going to sand it all today. Um, so the next step is basically just to round off the top and bottom and shape it, and that I'm going to do with a spindle gouge. Um, I tend to do most with a half-inch spindle gouge rather than a 3/8. I just find it a little more controllable tool. And also a lot of off center work, you're getting fairly far off the tool rest. So the bulk or the thickness of the half-inch spindle gouge I find advantageous. So I'm just going to start to do the top of this. Um, Now actually at this point I can move my tool rest in a little closer because I'm done with my curve. So and now if I wanted to do any more turning on the curve, I'm screwed because my uh, markings are gone. My center point. And I'll be good. Even though at this point I probably could move the tool rest, but I'm going to behave. So at this point, it's just the same as any other bottle stopper that you might make. I might be embellishing that with a little chatter. See how that looks. Not too bad. Uh, so yeah, I could sand that surface. I could even take what I like to do with those. I'm not going to do it, but I brought along this is a um, texturing wheel, put a little texture and maybe some grooves and some color on the end. Uh, Everyone probably knows we lost Nick Cook recently. Who I mean, not Nick, Nick Agar, great turner. And I never had the pleasure of meeting him. I understand he was a really nice guy, good, but great turner and great embellisher. But I remember some years ago seeing a video that he did about these Sorby texturing tools and spiraling tools, and he had both the large one and the small one. Actually, had multiples, so he didn't have to change wheels in between. And so he was doing all these on the surface of end grain, and after every single one, he would, he'd finish, he'd do the whatever pattern he was doing, and then he'd say, "And now when we add some color, you can really see the strength of this pattern." And then the next one, I know we had some color. You could really see the strength of this pattern. It was after every single one, but he did some beautiful work with it. And I have both large and small of these tools, and I do use them quite a bit. And then I just need to work on bring the other end down to the diameter of the bottle stopper insert. And I like the way this looks when you cut this, top and bottom to round. I think the transition just looks really attractive. Okay. And yeah, this is no sanding at all. Okay. And of course, like I said, you can do that with lidded boxes. Um, I passed these. This one unfortunately came out a little thin at the bottom, but this one was pretty good. But yeah, I did. I basically just turned the spiral or the twist, and then cut it. Did everything else that you would normally do as with a. Yeah, it was one piece of wood. I made tendons on them, and then just cut the twist, and then made them into salt and pepper grinders, mills, whatever you want to call them. Okay, let's go on. Uh, the next step that I'm going to do is kind of this is a transition between things that I've learned from Barbara and from Cindy's work, and also stuff that we did in the Escalon workshop. And that is to do things between centers, but on multiple axes. We're only going to do two axes today, and I want to show you something that's kind of cool with this. All of these pieces are done on just two axes. Or no, this one was done on three, I think. And so just by, moving this piece, you can get these interesting shapes. You can make candle holders or other things out of them. And I want to show you actually something that I did with one of these. So in this case, I'm going to use, this is my brand new extended cup center. It's what sometimes we call a safety center. And the safety center, it is just a cup with a point. And so if you do get a catch, it's going to spin and not catch on you. So I'm going to put it between these two centers. Nice. There's two nice things. Actually, Trent just started making this, but this is something Escalon uses all the time. And there's two nice things about it. One, is that it gets you away from the headstock a little bit, gives you a little more working room. And two, you can put it right through your chuck and into the spindle. It's long enough for that. So, and that's particularly helpful when we get to the Escalon chuck. So, uh, no, I think I've generally done all of this on dry wood, you know. So, okay, the layout on, let me just show the layout here. Does that work? Okay. Um, I found the center on this, and then I marked about a half inch from either side. And all I'm going to do with this, I'm just going to use that offset mounting here. I'm going to put that here and that there. Good. So yeah, particularly some of those rules of turning, always spinning your work. When you're doing multi-axis, it's really important. Uh, I've heard of people ruining a piece by not doing that first. No, nobody in our club would do that, but you know, we're all way too experienced for that. But yeah, okay. So this is going to be almost all with my half-inch spindle gouge, and I'm going to start it from zero and then speed it up. But I am going to be again in the 2000 range. And you can see where the center of that is. And I'm just going to start making a cove there to begin with. Oh, I should have asked if there were any questions before I went on about the, yeah. Well, you could do, you know, I mean, if you're accurate, you could, I don't see any reason why you couldn't do six, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Six is, I think, doable. Yeah. You'd have a very shallow twist. But I think it could be. I haven't done that, but I don't see any reason why you couldn't. And from the layout standpoint, you would just be dividing those in between the using your dividers to go in between those points, making 6 points around the circle. And there I really would encourage color coding, especially if you're trying to do it with a twist, because yeah, and that would give you a lot of options too. You could go 1 to 2, 2 to 3, or you could go 1 to 3, 2 to 4, etc. You know, and get more of a twist. You could go backwards and get the opposite twist. You know, just any number of things that you could do with that. Yeah, Andy. Oh, sure. I've done that. Yeah, it makes a good handle, and you can also just if you do tool handles straight 3-sided. A lot of people do that. In fact, if you're John Geem is going to do a demo on that for the Loveland Club next month on the 3-sided tool handle. If you want to make it up there, so that'll be worthwhile. But yeah, definitely a 3-sided handle. Actually, what now on hollowing tools? I don't didn't bring one with me, but on hollowing tools, I like is because you do hold down at the end here. I will just offset it once and create a flat in the direction that I want to have that. So, you know, it just gives you that grip on the end of the hollowing tool. But yeah, the three-sided handles, great idea, and it has been done a lot. Yeah. Oh yeah. And one way of doing that is just to only offset one end. You can leave one end on center, and put the other onto the offsets. But you can also do that, yeah, from you could have a larger circle on one end, a smaller circle on the other. The possibilities are just almost unlimited. So, okay, so any questions about the layout on this? Pretty simple. Draw a diagonal line and then make a mark. I will need my center later, but right now I don't need the center mark. And one thing I find, I mean, I think we all struggle with it sometimes, but I find that multi-axis work really helps to get you to put less pressure on the wood. You put your pressure down into the tool rest and let the tool do the cutting. I would always hear Richard Raffin use the term, let the wood come to the tool. And it never quite made sense to me until when Pat Carroll was here. He's put it a different way. He would say, we call ourselves wood turners. We're not wood turners. This is the wood turner. We are tool holders. And if you think of it that way, okay, you're holding the tool and that wood is rotating into the tool and doing the cut. Just made so much sense to me when he said it that way. Now, when I come back here, I'm using my bevel to find where the wood ends. Took a little too big of a bite there, backed off. Now, in this case, I'm going to be creating a bead in the middle here. And I don't want that bead to be perfectly round, because if it's perfectly round, it doesn't look as offset when you straighten it out. So I'm trying to make a kind of an oval shaped bead. And perfect spheres are too hard anyway. So, yeah. Oh, by the way, it's when I mentioned the tap handles with that twist. If you do make tap handles, they do use the same 3/8 10 thread as bottle stoppers. So if you buy your bottle stopper inserts from, say, Ruth Niles or whatever. Okay, let's see how that looks now. Oh, I still have a flat on there. Okay, got to go in a little further. Thought it felt. I think it was Chris Haley recently. He talked about if you're going to check that, use the back of your fingernail, not sticking your finger this way. And that way you can feel if it's smooth. And don't touch those square parts. So last year for the holidays, I made a bunch of these with much smaller diameter wood and just made icicle ornaments with the bead in the center. And they came out kind of nice. And then painted and decorated them and all that. I think that's what I brought for our holiday ornament exchange. Did it again. Oh, I still have a little flat on there. Okay. Um, just get that. And then I'll mention about sanding this. I got it. Ah, finally. Okay. Now if when you want to sand this, if you have perfect cuts like Raleigh, you don't need to, but um, you take a long strip of sandpaper and hold it on either side like this, so that your hands are not hitting these corners because it's I've been told it's uncomfortable. I no, no, Ollie. Just you wait. Surfaces look there. Just one more cut on this one. Okay. For a demo, I'll accept that. Now I'm done with that part. I'm just going to put it on center here. And let's see which, yeah, this should be my top. And so let me turn it around here. Touch it just a little bit there. Oh, I see. It's just some fuzz making that noise. Now, I do have to be careful here because remember that that ball is off center. So if I cut too far here, I might actually, cut onto the ball. And I'm trying to create basically a collar here, a, a disc. Hmm. Now I'm just going to round this off. I don't know. No, it doesn't really matter. Yeah. And now what I'm going to do here is form something called a tenon on this end using my ultra friendly Badan tool. I don't know if anybody saw, but on Friday, uh, Cindy Drozda hosted Emma at her shop, and she and the two of them, along with Todd Rains, did a collaborative project, long distance, where they made a bowl, decorated it, and Todd made a lid for it. Don't know how well it fit because they weren't in the same location. But Todd came. I want to get this. He's got a sizing tool. It just hooks um, over your tail center and gives you the size for your tenon. And hmm so it's something that he 3D prints. So I want to get one of those. Hmm. But this will do. And Emma also mentioned, I'm using dovetail jaws, but uh, not to make your dovetail too extreme because if you do, all it's doing is gripping on the very edge of your dovetail and crushing it. So, a little bit more of it. Okay, that'll do. Oh, longer than I thought. Uh, okay. I didn't really have to take that off. Well, I do now, but um, well, the benefit of it is I could have started this project with this in here and not, if I had already had my chuck on the lathe, and then I wouldn't have to remove that, the chuck to use this, and that's going all the way into the Morse taper. I mean, sometimes I know I've done it too. We grip, the a center in our chuck, but it's not really advised. I've never had a problem with it, but some people say it's not a good idea. Okay, I don't know. Yeah, yeah, exactly. I don't know how many chucks I have. I don't know how many sets of jaws I have. I don't know how many bowl gouges I have. I know that I have one bidan. How about that? Pardon? Well, good for you, Keith. One-upmanship all the time. Like I said, the bidan is like the skew, but without the compassion. Jean-Francois says you should practice with the bidan 10 minutes every day, so but no more than 10 minutes and never on Sunday. Yeah. Yeah. No, no, I just knew. Yeah. No, I just never learned how to turn anything round. So let's put a bead there. And then just clean up the top of that. And of course, at this point, you could drill a hole if you wanted to make it a candle holder, tea light holder, or something like that. Don, come on, vertical. Oh, need one more cut down here. Yeah. Now, as I say, you could drill a hole in there, make it a tea light holder or something like that. Uh, last, my wife does a lot of holiday decorations. She loves them. And so I made something similar to this, and I made it as a tea light holder. She looked at it and said, "Oh, it's a snowman." So I painted it, put a face on it, and sure enough, it was a snowman. And I think it's actually kind of a cool snowman. Uh, but any questions about that project? Oops, sorry. Oh, you broke it. I wouldn't. I just part it off. Yeah, I would just part it off. In fact, that's what I'll probably take that home and you know uh put a make it a tea light holder. I didn't bring a drill. I didn't want to go into that today. But, um, I I drew two lines across the diagonal, and on from opposite sides I offset it by a half an inch. So I made a mark a half inch on either side of that diagonal, and then just mounted it there. Yeah, it is pretty big. Yeah, yeah. Hmm. Well, actually, mine was a half inch from the end, not from the center. So it's a bigger, it was probably farther from the center than a half inch. Yeah. Although, but you're looking at that shadow, you can see the wood, how it, on either side of you. So it's really not as intimidating as you think, so for a beginner. I will say, like I mentioned earlier, that you have to be careful. If you look at this one carefully, I did when I was doing this, I cut into because this part came down far enough that when I cut there, I cut off the back. This was in Escalon's class, but you can see how that you can do that because of the offset. You have to be conscious of where that offset wood is when you turn it around to or put it on center. Okay. Can we take a 10-minute break so I can eat lunch? Oh, no, Raleigh doesn't eat lunch. Oh, just for me, you'll eat my lunch? Yeah.
I learned. I brought coach. Oh, I know.
Uh,
Never mind.
Did everybody? Actually, I can turn the mic off now as we're taking a break.
No, it's
I made plant.
he turned 2 things, I think.
Yeah. Let's see.
Okay. Think I'm about ready again. And Keith does want to say something before we start again.
I'm ready to go back here, so.
Yeah. If I understand it right.
So we had a shop tour last Saturday, awesome. At, environmental tree care. One of the demos, some of you guys were there, was a sawmill demo. And that was a really big, both about 1,800 pounds. Must have been some standing dead, it got cut in there. When we cut into it, it was, had lots of smoke. Also has some proper amps and stuff. Anyway, he decided to raffle off the third cut. And I won that. I took it home and then I go, oh my God, when am I gonna have time to process this thing that's this thick and 12 foot long and weighs 300 pounds? So I'm inviting you to bring your chainsaw to my house and take a piece of that. Because I don't want it to sit there and just start to deteriorate. Nice enough piece. And it's thick enough, it's a really nice small one, so. So I would, and it's the right thickness that you, if you have a 14 pounds, I should be able to cut it. And put a whole one bands off and have them get it home. But, well, I haven't cut into it yet because you know how it is, you start cutting into it, then you got more end grain. The perfect situation for the best order of the club is, you know, half a dozen people came over, took some pieces off, and all the process. I don't really have the time or where I gotta have to put any, why don't I go bring anything home? But there's a couple. Yeah, but there's the. Well, in Colorado, really make all this often. The next cut is gonna work. No, I was hoping they'd do another cut. This is pretty nice, and some sections you'll have some fault, some will have, it's kind of funky. So they take as much as you want once you get the process. The bolt blanks, turn them, or you can cut them into, you can coat them and let them sit on your shelf. I think that's the nickel's not too bad. Or how do you find it? You got a bolt finish, bolt, put a bolt on it, seal it. Take it back. So, please give me a call. And I'll let Don get back.
Okay. So before we move along, any other questions on the stuff that I did in the first half? None. Okay. I explained everything so well that nobody has any question. Okay. Uh-huh. I did already. Yeah, yeah. And I'm demanding that they double my pay as president too. Mm-hmm. So, okay. So last year I got to take a 3-day class with Jean-Francois Escalon, who is, I mean, just an incredible French turner. I think this is his last U.S. tour. So I'm really fortunate to have gotten to study with him. And I always really had a great admiration for his work. And a lot, you know, so much of it is multi-axis work. On the first day, we pretty much did what I just did, you know, just between centers multi-axis kind of things. And you'll see examples of that, like in Barbara Dill's work, and a lot of people have done that sort of thing. Um, and then the second day, I had been fortunate actually. Uh, last the it was a while ago. There was a tool sale up in Wyoming, and I came across this Escalon eccentric chuck, and it was like $50. I think it's about 300. Uh, and so, and I didn't at the time. Other than knowing who Escalon was, I didn't know anything about this chuck. I wasn't even sure if it was all there, But I thought $50, I'm gonna, snag it. And I called Laurent to ask him, Laurent Duclos, if you don't know him, who went, he actually was a student at the Escalon school in France and then was teacher there as well. So, and now he lives here in Colorado with Kylie Bosch. So, um, I called Laurent to ask him about this. He says, "Oh, well, Escalon's going to be coming here. We might need to borrow your chuck." I said, "Well, you can only borrow my truck if I'm in the class." So, yeah. So, at any rate, I did find out that it was complete, and it's a really cool chuck. It's kind of based on the old production turners. A lot of times used to use and some people still do, what they call cup chucks, and it's basically just a cylinder, and you pound a piece of wood into it and use that as a chuck if you're, and especially if you're doing production work and you want to, turn out a lot of stuff real quick, you pound one in, pop it out, and then go on to the next one. So this is kind of based on the same thing, except that the cup moves. And it's a really well thought out chuck. It has these cylinders. There are different sizes. This is the 40 millimeter chuck here. I think this is 20 and this is 10. I have only used this one, but and it seems like I've seen some videos of people saying, "I've only used the 40 millimeters." But the cool thing about it, if I take this out of here, take it out and pass it around actually. And when you take a look at it, it's got these lines here, it's got these indentations here, and this is for indexing it. So Andy, why don't you take that, pass it around. And they all have that. There are 6 holes here, but you only need 2 screws. And there's one screw that has a tapered point. Let's see, is that on camera? It's really small. Actually, I can pass these around too. One with a tapered point and one with a flat point. So, and then there are 3 little indexing marks on the chuck. And so when you put one of these balls in here, you line up one of these holes with the tapered screw, and you tighten that just enough. Lined up here. There we go. That should do it. You line it so that it will still rotate in there. And then you set your angle and you tighten down the flat screw, and then you tighten down the tapered screw again. And that will set it at whatever angle you're going to put that chuck. So I'm going to take this one back. Yeah. So you can set it straight. In fact, I will to start with, but and I'll need that back as soon as we're done passing it around. Yeah, you can get them. Actually, somebody had some. They were selling them at the last year's symposium. Yeah. I know a few people from the club said they'd gotten them. In fact, I'm surprised. Andy Zartman said he got one and he really wanted to be here to see how to use it. So, Yeah, but he's not here. Uh, so as soon as that comes back up, now this is all important. This is a 10 incisor, and so when you want to put a piece of wood into this chuck, I'm going to use this as the 40 millimeter size, but these are the various sizes for the other balls, and so you make a tenon of that size, and then you basically force it into the chuck with your tailstock, and that's
Big.
usually about half inch or so. Okay, so pardon? No, but um, so I'm going to actually set it pretty much straight and leave it loose to begin with. Take this. Let's see, anything else I need? And I do need those. Don't lose those screws. Oh, okay. Mhm. So this is where this extended cup center really comes in handy because I can just put that right into the chuck, right through the chuck into the tail, into the headstock. And then I will take this blank. So with the Badan, I always raise the tool rest just like you would with a skew, get a little bit higher up on the wood, somewhere 10 or 11 o'clock. Mm. I'm actually making this slightly tapered so that it really wedges into the chuck. It should work. And that's that. The one thing about that tenon is that if you do knock it out of the chuck, you're pretty much screwed. It's not gonna, you're never gonna get it lined up again, or almost impossible to do that. Yep, that's it. And the answer to the question of how do you get it back out of the chuck, it's with great difficulty. You can, I don't have a long enough knockout bar to go through. Oops. What I usually do, that's why you're not supposed to leave your tools sitting on the lathe. Uh, what I usually do is take a chisel and a hammer and just kind of tap it out a little bit at a time. Yep. Mhm. Yep. I thought we had one. No. So I'm going to loosen my set screws and I'm going to offset this precisely this much. Actually, I'm using one of the lines. If they're concentric here, they're, I just look to go up one line from the center. So I'm not. No, you don't need to do any of that. No, this is just what looks good. Yeah. Right next to each other. Yeah. And I say you have to put the flat end one, the one that's on this the center on the mark. That's the tapered one so that it can pivot on that. Now, the other holes are so that if you want to rotate the piece, like I think you were looking at this one. This was not only different offsets but also rotated. So then you'd get your different cascading thing. So this is, I think, the first thing we did with the chuck, and this is what Jean-Francois calls his golf club shape. I've seen people make geese this way and stuff like that. He also makes Keith is showing Keith a picture of it. He makes a scoop out like this, and it's a really cool little scoop. So, okay. So now what I'm going to do, I've set it off center, and I'm going to work on my first element up here, and I'm just going to bring all of this down. And you could do this with the spindle roughing gouge if you want. And if you're looking at Barbara Dill's charts, this would now be non-parallel axes, but round outcomes. So I am going to turn this all the way down to round. So a very old and very bad joke, which I promise will be relevant shortly. Uh, there's this Jewish man, and he decides to convert to Catholicism. And so he goes through all the training and everything, and finally at the end of his, say, well, okay, born a Jew, born a Jew, raised a Jew, baptized a Catholic. And he goes, and they said, this was obviously a very old joke. This is the days when they said, and we don't eat meat on Fridays. And so then the priest who did this, is walking past his house on a Friday, and he smells the steak cooking on the grill. And he's about to walk back there and confront him on him, and he sees him like, born a cow, raised a cow, baptized a fish. So this will become, so born a parting tool, raised a parting tool, baptized a bidan. It's basically the same thing as a bidan, a very sharp edge there. And This enables me to do stuff like this. I am done with my tailstock for the duration of this project because I will never be able to put it back. Not on this. But next month, Rick will teach you everything you need to know about captive rings. Let's see how that's. Still got some of that marker on my finger. It looks like I bled on my project. Okay. Now, what I'm going to do, I would at this point sand this, but I'm not doing any sanding on this today. Loosen up my ring. Now, what I'm trying to do is get to the maximum diameter that I can save out of this in an oval shape. So I'm trying to set this in such a way that I'm going to cut to the back of this shape right here and then leave a ring around here and make that golf club shape. So let's probably about it. Like I say, I can't ever put my tailstock back at this point. It's history. Yep. Now in this project, I can move my tool rest between cuts because I'm not looking for absolute consistency. I'm just looking for an interesting shape. Let's set that off somewhere. So yeah, when he makes that scoop, he has to go in and hollow it this way to get inside of there. Not always. Yeah, I, I think it's in there pretty solid. I hope. I won't say that I've never pulled it out. Hmm. Now you see how I'm approaching the back of that. Now I can actually see that shadow line over here as I'm you know, cutting towards there. And so I'm cutting to the right to the back of this protrusion there. And I can see that I'm still not quite round here. That's right about where I want it to be. Clean that up a little bit. So yeah, I'm cutting a cove in a fairly normal manner, you know, going from side to side here. It's too easy to hit this speed control on here. I used to have a Laguna 18 and the speed control was so easy to hit. Just, like you'd be turning to make a cut this way and just always hit it. I know I can. Yes. In fact, I should because I usually keep mine down here. Yeah. Pardon? Huh. Shouldn't be cutting that high anymore. There we go. Okay. Now we got a second ring. I think I will just clean this cut up a little bit. Jean-Francois always put this little fillet at the bottom of the form to kind of separate the elements. I think it looks good. Plus, if I'm demonstrating his chuck, I might as well kind of, yeah. Okay, so let's do another offset and maybe a rotation this time. So now I'm using these marks here and loosen that. Yeah, there are marks both on the ball and on the chuck, so that there's a line right here. So now, and there's a little dent on the ball there, and there's a series of them. So now I'm going to rotate this. I'm going to go 2 marks. And trying to go about there, I think. And there's nothing formulaic about this. It's just you kind of guess what you think is going to look good. Mm-hmm. Or cut. So during the Escalon class, the third day, we were doing a form called the trembleur. Is there anybody not familiar with the trembleur? It's a, it's kind of a classic French thing, and you have some fairly large beads with very small shafts in between them. And in order to turn it, you have to support it with string steadies. You just set up these string steadies and hold it. And so we were doing ours, with 3 elements that we were supposed to do. And I got mine all done down to 3 elements. I had the supports in there and everything. And Jean-Francois comes over and looks at it and says, "Oh, that's very nice. You should do a 4th." Do I need to finish the story? Yep. Except this was one more whole element. Yeah. Yeah. And at some point, all of a sudden, it's like you could just see it start to vibrate. And it's like just, you know, I had still had three elements, but they were all separate. Yeah, the tremblure is so delicate that you normally, in fact, sometimes you even have to take it off the lathe by putting it into a glass tube, and it never comes out. I guess that tremblure is kind of, like a final exam for French turners. And Laurent said, I think he had something like, I think he told me 12 or 16 studies on his by the time he was finished. Any questions on this while I'm amusing myself? Uh, that one went away. Oh well. Only get a two-ring circus today. So let's see. Clean that cut up a little bit. And then the final step is I'm going to put it on center and part it off. Mhm. Put a little bead on the bottom here. And we'll part it off. Always make a relief cut with the parting tool. You want it for evidence? Um, What? No, I'm just naturally blurry. I was going to say this is going to be, looks like I'm turning something on keep the Dachos lathe. Okay, now I have one more very quick project if you're willing to stick around for it. Um, but that's dependent on me getting this, here we go. Getting this waste wood out of the chuck. So yeah, except the knockout bar isn't long enough. It's coming. Now, actually, the other method, you can turn it out of there. Just kind of like hollowing a goblet and get most of the wood out, and then it'll just break out. And I have done that too. But it takes longer than doing this. That's almost out. There we go. Okay. So, for the final thing I was going to do today, I already prepared this blank, and I thought, well, something that actually it's kind of fun to make mushrooms. I'm not a big mushroom guy, but not too long ago I had to do I shouldn't say had to do, got to do with the Northern Club. We're trying to get this going here too. It's a collaboration project, and so we were randomly paired up, and I was paired up with Clarence Sitzman up there, who's a very different turner from me, and so we had a time actually at first trying to figure out what we were going to do for a project that we could collaborate on, and then came up that Colorado has recently named a new state mushroom, and it is called the emperor mushroom, and it's not a hallucinogenic mushroom, but but the thing is that that mushroom used to be known as the prince mushroom. So I hit on the mushroom formerly known as Prince. And if you remember the symbol that Prince at some point changed his name to, it was unpronounceable, but so we did laser engrave that on my mushroom. We actually made a whole kind of forest of mushrooms. And like I said, Clarence's were very different from mine. Mine tend to be, multi-axis natural edges, and his were very straight. But then we decorated each other's mushrooms too, and I did a lot of carving and stuff on his and burning on his. So it ended up being kind of a fun project. But and his son had the laser engraver that we could put the Prince logo on my mushroom, and that was kind of the center point of it. And so at any rate, I started thinking about, well, could I make mushrooms with this chuck? And of course I said, well, why not? And so I cheated. I made my tenon in advance so you wouldn't have to sit through all that again. And now let's set this precisely off center. And we'll see how this goes. You know, mushrooms always seem to have that little ridge in the middle of the stem. Now, if you don't have this chuck, you could do the same project just by offsetting your tenon in the jaws. A lot of people do that. I've seen, Ellie Avicera do it and Theo Harlampu. One thing I'll say about that, most of us are using like chucks with dovetail jaws. If you have a Nova chuck, instead of having a, oh, dead. Instead of having a dovetail jaw, it has a jaw that comes in the middle like this, sort of like this, and they call it a hawk's beak. And I've heard, particularly Theo Lahalampu talks about that. That's a more, if you're going to do this offset, that is actually a more secure hold than putting it in your dovetail jaws for the offset. I don't really like that hawk's beak for normal turning, but that's what Nova makes, and also Record Power does the same thing on their standard jaws. Okay, I had planned to bring a hollowing tool to get up underneath that mushroom. I didn't. But I thought when we did that project, it was kind of cool to have the difference between the more stylized mushrooms and more earthy looking ones in combination. And I did use some of the Joe Sonia one of the iridescent paints to give it some of that hallucinogenic property. And oh yeah, I've used those quite a bit, and I like them. It was Pat Carroll showed a technique of dabbing it on with a balloon, and you get. And I didn't have a balloon handy, but I was wearing a rubber glove, and I thought, oh, 5 colors. No, I had it on. I just dabbed my fingers in 5 different colors. Went. It's kind of fun. Okay. I need to clean up the bottom of that. And I don't think mushrooms have captive rings, so I'm not doing one. Nope, I won't do it. I was about to move the tool rest. Make it slightly concave so it'll stand. Get rid of the elbow stabber. And put this back on center now, or somewhere. Yeah, that should do it. And of course, I'm never too particular about the surface finish on a mushroom because I'm gonna carve the shit out of it anyway. Who knows what else? Can I say shit in the brown bag demo? We'll get deep. And with this having a natural edge and everything, I don't want to risk putting my hand around it. So since that's going to be um, hand sanded and stuff anyway, what do I do with it? Where's my little? Oh, there it is. I'm just going to cut this off. And that's all I got. It's everything I know. Mm-hmm. Oh, you don't want, no. Let's see. Yeah. Yeah. So, okay. There's a clean one. Uh, uh, was at her husband's funeral, and guy comes up to her and says, "Would you mind if I said a word?" And she said, "No, not at all." He stands up and says, "Plethora," and sits down. And she goes, "Thanks. That means a lot." Yeah, well, as I used to say in the music business, every musician thinks he's a comedian, and every comedian thinks they're a musician. So, yeah.